Hey there nation, and welcome to another episode of Way of the Underhive. This series is dedicated to helping brand new players to Necromunda build their starting rosters and learn more about the game mechanics of their favorite gangs. And on today's episode we will discuss playing an Imperial Imposters Outcast Gang for Necromunda Ash Wastes. We will discuss their strengths, their weaknesses, their fighters, their playstyle, and more importantly provide critical information that you can use in your campaign. At the same time, we'll also provide you guys a 1400 point roster that you could use for your very first campaign by playing Imperial Imposters Outcasts. So that being said, let's get this video on a roll. Alright, so let's talk about the strengths of playing a delegation outcast gang. So potentially it's one of the most powerful starting gangs that you can actually have in a campaign, and the reason why is because of the fighters that make up your delegations. Regardless if you're playing criminal, merchant, or noble house delegations, they usually all start off with excellent equipment and skills right from the start. In some cases they have some really good stats, and they have some very powerful special rules that can make them really advantageous and very competitive in an Ash Waste campaign. At the same time, you can also take advantage of weird disciplines now because the Book of the Outcast release those weird disciplines. You can even customize your fighters even further. And in addition to adding vehicles with heavier weapon options and different boons and weapon gears from those vehicles, could also give your delegation gang a huge advantage out in the Ash Wastes of Necromunda. And these are some of the advantages and strengths of actually playing a delegation outcast gang. Alright, so perhaps the biggest weakness of actually playing a delegation gang that's an outcast gang is that you cannot take any alliances whatsoever. If you decide to use the delegation as the core of your gang, no alliances are available to you. So for example, if you're a merchant guild delegation gang, you can't take criminal alliances or noble house alliances, and vice versa for all the other ones as well. So that's one of the biggest weaknesses of playing a delegation gang. If you really like using alliances to help your gang out, this might not be the one for you. However though, like I said before in the strengths, it does give you a leg up in the actual beginning of a campaign because you have better fighters, better equipment, and better skills. Now, one of the weaknesses of this game, of course, is that if you decide to play WYSIWYG, which is an acronym for what you see is what you get type of gangs, this can be quite pricey in my opinion. And the reason why is because, for example, if you were to play a Nauticin siphoning delegation, for example, as the core of your gang, and you want to buy the Forge World miniatures in order to fill that gang, those Forge World miniatures can be quite expensive. So because of that, I would suggest looking for cheaper alternatives or convert your own in most cases. A lot of these delegations have not been manufactured yet, so you could possibly do that, but that's just something you might want to take into account. Me, of course, I would never actually do that. I would just convert my own or find alternate ways to get cheaper miniatures, and that's the thing I would keep in mind when I would be playing a delegation gang. At the same time, these gangs are also very expensive to field in terms of credits. These delegations, like I said, have a lot of skills, a lot of weapons, better stats, and you're going to pay for those. For example, I think the cheapest of the delegations starts off at like 540 credits, I believe. So because of that, it's going to be very, very expensive for you to fill these fighters, but that's the way it goes. And lastly, probably the biggest weakness of actually playing an outcast delegation gang is that you do have to be aware of the balanced bandwagon. A lot of balanced bandwagon types will scream overpowered or game breaking or unfair and so on and so forth. But of course, once again, just ignore those immaturity of those players, drink the salt of their tears, and just use that to power yourself and destroying your enemies. So these are some of the strengths and weaknesses involved in playing a delegation gang. Alright, so when it comes to delegation gangs, once again, you get to pick from merchant guilds, criminal syndicates, or noble houses, and use those delegations you get from those alliances to form the core of your gang. Leaders also get archetypes and affiliations depending on what delegation you choose. Also, champions also get archetypes as well, so that allows for a lot of customization for your different members of your delegations depending on the affiliations and the archetypes that you choose. Now, once again, remember, archetypes depend on what kind of primary and secondary skills your champions and your leaders receive, while affiliations usually determine what kind of weapons and equipment you can get from the starting list, if not from the trading post as well. At the same time, the nice thing about these delegations is that the members of those delegations gain experience and they can purchase weapons and equipment over time, just like any other gang, so that part is really, really cool. And once again, I have to make sure I stress this a lot. If you decide to take a delegation outcast gang, you cannot make any alliances whatsoever in the future, so just be aware when that actually happens and keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to your actual criminal delegations that you actually play in your outcast gang, there's pretty much 5 that you can choose from, alright? Now, granted, there are 6 criminal syndicate factions within the Book of Judgment. However, the Narcolords are not present in this delegation, and the reason why is because their delegation just consists of D3 plus 2 Hive scum that you could just hire, so that's the reason why they don't have that faction available to you. However, for your delegations, though, you can play a Smuggler Short Party from the Cold Traders, a Factoria Work Gang from the Rogue Factoria faction. You can play a Master Charlatan from the Imperial Imposters faction, you can play a Rebel Lord from the Fallen Houses faction, or a Mind-Locked Wyrd from the Psi Syndicate faction as well. So these are the 5 delegations that you could actually choose from in order to build your gangs. Now once again, I must remind you, of course, if you decide to do a delegation gang from one of the criminal syndicates, you will not be able to allow to take allies in your list, so keep that in mind. However, there are some advantages. Any weapons, equipment that these gangs actually start off with, their delegations, you can purchase those for all of your outcast champions and outcast Hive scum as well. So that's where the trade-off comes in. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about how you can use your criminal delegation specifically in the next slide. Alright, so let's talk about the Imperial Imposter. This guy's going to cost you 125 credits because he counts as your outcast leader for your gang. Now originally, you got the Imperial Imposters because they were used for campaign bonuses for Law and Misrule campaigns, at the same time generating some additional credits for yourself with scenarios that you got to pay. And at the same time, you also got a very stealthy character who's also quite deadly as well. However, with this new Book of the Outcast that came out with this gang, you can turn your Master Charlatan into an Assassin's Creed level, invisible, predator destroying, Spider-Man crawler who can slay with the very best of them. Alright, your leader will be a one-person ninja assassin who will slay in close combat and in shooting all day, every day. And at the same time, because you have this Master Charlatan in your gang, you actually have some really powerful equipment that you can purchase for your gang for your regular outcast fighters. You can get needle pistols for 30 credits, stiletto swords for 35 credits, you can get Digi-Lasers for 25 credits apiece, Holochromatic fields for 100 credits, and Falsehoods, which is probably the best thing in this list, for 40 credits for your gang. So you'll be able to hit out the perfect stealth gang of your dreams with weapons equipment that's going to give them a lot of buffs in order to fight against their opponents. So this group is going to be extremely deadly. And then the Ashway, so you combine this with vehicles and heavy weapons, you're going to be like the Predator from Prey, as well as from all the Predator movies, turning invisible and just slaying people out in the wastelands. So that being said, let's go and talk about your leader, which is going to be the Master Charlatan. Alright, so let's talk about the Master Charlatan real quick. This will be the leader of your gang. This character's got a 5 instrument allowance as well as 3+ weapon skill and ballistic skill. They have 3 strength and 3 toughness. They have 3 wounds, 4+ for initiative, 2 attacks. They have 7 leadership, 5 cool, 6 willpower, as well as 6 intelligence. So like I said before, the Master Charlatan will be the leader of your gang, and oddly enough, you're going to want to put a Wyrd archetype on this guy. And the reason why you want to put a Wyrd archetype on this guy is because of Biomancy discipline. The Biomancy discipline will turn your guys' Master Charlatan into an alpha level ninja killer black ops master assassin who's going to tear apart the entirety of the battlefield. Now the reason why that's the case is because of their willpower. Their willpower is a 6+, which means they'll have a 72% chance of success on powers, and that's going to give them abilities to get those powers off. In my opinion, you want to increase the willpower when leveling up this character to make that ability more reliable. Now you will be playing this leader a little bit different than normally, and the reason why is you could probably run this guy as a solo fighter rather than a traditional leader. Traditionally, when you look at my list, I usually put my leaders in a more of a support defensive kind of role, but the Master Charlatan is going to be purely offensive, and they'll be operating either with a very, very small crack team or by themselves in most cases. Now when it comes to their weapons, they do come with mesh armor off the bat for that 5-up armor save. They also have a needle pistol, which is pretty good as well as a stiletto sword. They also have 4 Digi-Lasers, which are really nice because they have versatile trait attached to them. They also have a holochromatic field, which can make them very, very difficult to shoot at, and at the same time you have falsehoods, which are really, really powerful as well. My suggestion to you is when you recruit the Master Charlatan, so you got the credits, purchase a needle rifle for this fighter. The reason why is because it'll be perfect for such a stealth fighter. You can't be targeted until turn 2 because of the falsehood that your characters are wearing, and you got minus to hit against with a holochromatic field. You combine that with silent weapons and your stiletto sword, like your needle pistol, as well as your needle rifle. You'll be uber stealthy because you won't make any sound. Super deadly, and that needle rifle is going to let you get that little bit further range, and at the same time take advantage of those toxin abilities on your opponents. Now your Master Charlatan comes pretty much with all the good stealth skills. They do have evade, so it makes it a little bit harder to hit. They also got Infiltrate, so they can come up anywhere in the battlefield, and they have Step Aside, which is excellent dodging attacks as well from your enemies, so that we can assassinate them in close combat. So like I said, you want to get the Biomancy discipline, and the reason why is because if your fighter does get injured with an injury die, you can roll 2 injury dice and pick which one you want to use, which is going to be really, really helpful. But here's the reason why you want the Biomancy power. So like I said before, you could turn this guy into an Assassin's Creed level predator, invisible predator, backslash, ninja assassin Creed type character. And that's because of the different powers that Biomancy offers you. So if you want to build like a parkour build for your leader, you can transverse over terrain and move very quickly up vertically. I would give you Arachnosis. Arachnosis is a basic power. It's going to give your character clamber as well as catfall and mighty leap skills so that they can transition across the battlefield very, very quickly. And if you want to make more like an invisible predator sniper build like from the film's Predator, I suggest you take Chameleon. It gives you a -2 hit modifier so long as they don't move, which is perfect to use with the needle rifle because then you can take a basic action power up, another basic action is shoot, and since you're not moving, it's going to give your enemies a -4 to hit against you in shooting. Oh, super powerful, just like the Predator from the Predator films. And then lastly, if you're looking for more of a general purpose build, you can go with the Quickening. The Quickening does give you 3+ movement, making you movement 8. It also adds +1 to your weapon skill and ballistic skill, making your weapon skill at 2 and ballistic skill 2+. So because you got a lot of options when it comes to getting your Master Charlatan ready to do combat, especially with the weird power. And eventually, if you get all 3 of these powers, because you're leveling up, you make your character extremely deadly with a lot of variety for their toolkit in order to accomplish their mission. So now that we're done talking about the Master Charlatan, let's talk about the Outcast Hive Scum as well as the Outcast Hive Champions. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the Underhive Outcast Champion real quick. For these gangs, these guys cost 60 credits apiece, and for their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness. They also have 2 wounds, they have 4 initiative, 1 attack. They have 6 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. So let's go on and talk about these guys real quick. So when it comes to the Underhive Outcast Champions, they're very versatile, and the reason why is because their stats are pretty much mediocre. Now that's both a good and a bad thing. While it might be bad because they can't excel at any one given thing, whether it's shooting or close combat, it does allow them to be able to equip a large variety of weapons and fulfill any role that you need them to fulfill within your gang as well. Now, when it also comes to your guys' Underhive Outcast Champions, archetypes, of course, are very, very important. But the problem with these guys, though, is that their archetypes are very limited for their skills, in my opinion. For example, they have 5 different archetypes they can choose from, but they only have 1 primary skill, and each of those archetypes followed by 2 secondaries. So, for example, if you were to take the Brawler archetype, Brawn would be your primary with Ferocity and Leadership as your secondaries. If you were a Gunslinger archetype, Shooting would be your primary with Agility as well as Leadership as your secondaries. For a Survivor archetype, Ferocity would be your primary, followed by Combat and Leadership for your secondaries. For Mastermind, Cunning would be your primary, with Leadership and Savant as your secondaries. And of course, for Weird archetypes, your Psychic Disciplines would be your primary, followed by Cunning and Leadership as your secondaries. Unfortunately for the Champion, there are no archetypes where combat is a primary, so that is kind of limiting on what you can do. So you won't be getting any skills really to increase your combat abilities, but better weapons and equipment choices could probably help out with that as well. Now, when it comes to their equipment and weapons, they can purchase pretty much anything they want to off the trading post, so long as it's within the rarity value of 8 on the trading post. So they are kind of limited in some of their choices, but the reason why that is the case is because you can take 1 champion for every 3 Hive Scum in your gang. So for example, if you have 6 Hive Scum in your gang, you can take 2 champions. If you got 9 Hive Scum, you can get 3 champions, and etc. So that's basically where the trade-off kind of comes in. And then finally, of course, we have our Underhive Outcast Hive Scum, which is your typical ganger and juvie level fighter for your gang. These guys cost 30 credits apiece. For their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 4+ weapon skill and ballistic skill, 3 strength and toughness. They have 1 wound, 4+ for initiative, 1 attack. They have 8+ for leadership, cool, willpower, and intelligence. And for their skill access, when they become a specialist, their primary is cunning, with ferocity as their secondary. Now, Underhive Scum, Outcast Scum, they're very mediocre, okay? But because of that, they're also very cheap to field. And even though they have very mediocre stats, they count as both gangers and juvie level fighters for your gang, and because their stats are still so mediocre, they can fulfill many different roles in your gang. You can equip them as shooters, close combat, you can use them as support, you can use them as suicide bombers, especially now that you can also put them on waster dirt bikes. They make great pursuers on waster dirt bikes, for example. So there's a variety of things you can do with these guys to fulfill pretty much any role that you want to. And plus, if you decide to make it into a delegation gang, you can also take better weapons equipment from the delegation lists as well. So that's another cool thing about Outcast Hive Scum as well. Now, unfortunately, you cannot start your campaign with an Outcast Specialist, so that part is kind of sad. Almost every single gang can have a Specialist except for Outcast, so that part is kind of sad, but that's the kind of the trade-off. Yes, you can't get those Specialists, but right at the start, but you have so many guys you can choose from, and plus your delegations can fulfill those roles anyways, so it's not that big of an issue. So that makes up your guys' Outcast Hive Scum. So let's talk about the gang list. I call it the Predator and Prey Imperial Imposter Outcast Gang. It's going to cost you 1,400 credits. The reason why I call it Predator and Prey is because your champions, as well as your Master Charlatan, are going to be like invisible for the most part, sneaking up on your enemies and assassinating fools, just like the monster from the Predator films. So first of all, your leader's going to be your Master Charlatan. It's going to cost you 165 credits. This fighter's got the Wyrd Archetype with mesh armor as well as needle rifle. They also have a needle pistol with Stiletto sword. They also got 4 Digi-Lasers, a Holochromatic field, a Falsehood, as well as Evade, Infiltrate, Step Aside, and the Biomancy discipline of Chameleon. After that, you have 2 Outcast Champions, Champions number 1 and 2. They both cost 170 credits apiece. Both guys will have Mastermind Archetypes. Both will have mesh armor for 5 armor saves. Both will have needle pistols for that close range shooting and silent trait. Both will have chain swords for close combat, and both will have falsehoods, so that way they can't be targeted by your enemies until at least turn 2. And they have the Infiltrate special ability, so they can sneak up on your opponents just as easily. Then after that, you have 2 Outcasts Hive Scum. Hive Scum number 1 and 2 cost 190 credits apiece. Both have mesh armor, both have blasting charges, both have flails, both have falsehoods, and both are riding Weiser's dirt bike. So Scum number 1, 2, and 3 are all equipped exactly the same. All 3 of those guys will be able to zoom up to your enemies. They won't be targeted because all 3 are carrying falsehoods. They can't be shot at until turn 2. And they'll be in perfect range to lob blasting charges at your opponent and to beat them to death with flails, which is actually kind of cool. After that, you have Outcast Scum number 4 and 5. Both those guys cost exactly the same at 45 credits apiece. Both those guys have last guns. And then lastly, you'll have a Scum Racer, which costs 235 credits. This fighter is driving a Ridge Runner as well as a Mining Laser. And that is what I like to call the Predator and Prey Imposter Outcast Gang. Alright, so the gang overview. Let's talk about how this gang operates. This gang is all about stealth and speed, and for 6 members of your gang, which is your leader, your 2 champions, and 3 Hive Scum on dirt bikes, your enemies can't engage them with shooting attacks, close combat attacks, or psychic powers until the end of turn number 2. So you have 1 to 2 turns of free activations to do whatever you want without being shot at, so long as you don't make any attacks every round, that is. At the same time, 3 members of your gang can also infiltrate onto the battlefield, allowing you to close the gap between you and your enemies. So this is a very dangerous gang. This gang consists of 3 fire teams. You have 1 support fire team and 2 assault fire teams. For your first assault fire team number 1, that's going to consist of your Master Charlatan, your Outcast Champion 1, and Outcast Champion number 2. Now these fighters stay within 3 inches of each other at all times, so that way they can take advantage of group activations. They will infiltrate onto the battlefield using their falsehoods to maneuver into position to strike, and then they will have to wait. Then they'll have until the end of turn number 2 to do so, or until they make an attack on their own. The Master Charlatan should put themselves in an area to where they can engage at a distance. Their needle rifle, working in tandem with Chameleon, should make it to where you can shoot at your targets, but your enemy will suffer a -40 hit against to fire back at you. Meanwhile, your 2 champions move in for the kill, engaging in close corner combat with the needle pistols and chain swords. They get those bonuses from those weapons of firing in close range as well as fighting in close combat, a really super deadly combination. After that, you have Assault Fire Team number 2, which consists of your Outcast Scum number 1, 2, and 3. These maniacs have Waster's dirt bikes that have movement 8 inches. Have them speed across the battlefield towards your enemy infantry or soft target, and once again, their falsehoods will protect them until the end of turn number 2, unless of course your Scum decide to attack. Now, once in range, have your Hive Scum attack by throwing blasting charges at your targets. Luckily, they should score some kills or put some serious injuries on your enemies, and then from there you charge them forward and finish off your enemies with flails using ride-by or coup de grace on them as well. Like I said, moving those guys all the way forward until turn 2 without being shot at, just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And then lastly, you have your support fire team that consists of your Outcast Scum number 4 and 5 and your Scum Racer. This support fire team is a bit bare bones with only laser weapons at their disposal, but that's perfectly fine. You can upgrade this group with either more fighters or better equipment as the campaign develops. This fire team's job is to speed up alongside Assault Team number 2. They provide sniper fire and suppressive fire with their mining laser as well as last guns and engage their targets such as enemy vehicles or however targets like leaders and champions. I highly suggest as the campaign develops that you get your Hive Scum hot shot last packs for strength 4 shots as well as telescoping sights for extra carnage at longer ranges. And like I said before, half your gang is going to sweep across the battlefield without your enemy not being able to do anything, and watch the panic look on your opponent's face as he realizes he can't do anything to you until turn 2, and then unleash the fury and destroy him. And that's what I like to call the Predator and Prey Imperial Imposter Outcast Gang for 1,400 credits. So in the end, playing a criminal syndicate delegation outcast gang is one of the greatest ways to add some diversity to a campaign and to Necromunda overall. You have lots of different powerful options with fighters, skills, equipment, as well as vehicles, and even more so now that you have those vehicles, and you can make some really interesting customized gangs. So it'd be actually kind of cool to see exactly what ends up happening now in the Ashways with all this diversity of criminal syndicates going on. So in my opinion, pick your favorite crime syndicate, get that outcast status, get up your gang, and go directly out to the Ashways and try to bring glory and wealth to yourself as a criminal syndicate outcast. The only thing I warn about, of course, is just watch out for the balanced bandwagon, because they're going to find some reason to gripe and always find a way to try to be salty. So that's good for you guys. As always, please remember to like, comment, and or subscribe. You guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.